Hi, everybody. I am author historian Jay Jennings, and this distinguished gentleman is.
Hi, I'm Courtney Joyner, proud permanent resident of Visaria.
You just moved there, right? You got your bags
Yes,
and your luggage?
up here forever. Yes,
Right. Well, I just moved from Regalburg. So anyway, we're good. But Court
we're
has
not
been
going to Regalburg.
no. But I guess first I'll do just a little review or synopsis of House of Frankenstein, Court, and then you
Go
can.
wild.
Yeah, and then you can take it from there. So let's talk about House of Frankenstein. 1944, starred Boris Karloff, Lon Chaney Jr. It was directed by Earl C. Canton. Of course, John Carradine's in it. Based on a story by Kurt Siodmak. It was the film is about Dr. Gustav Niemann, who escapes from prison, promises to give a new body to his friend, a distant friend Daniel. And I'm going to just show random photos from the movie. I have them in no specific order. And there's friend Daniel with his hump. What hump? And they murder Professor Lampini, and they take over his sideshow.
Chamber of Horrors.
Right, his Chamber of Horrors. And that's the famous look that Zuko gives right before he's strangled. And the Chamber of Horrors, the main attraction is the corpse of Count Dracula, which nobody believes, and we'll get to in the tidbits section. I mean, in the segment of dialogue and classic scenes. Anyway, after disposing of the Count, the two move on to the ruins of the ruins of Castle Frankenstein, where they find the body of Frankenstein's monster and Larry Talbot. And anyway, it's just, look at that look that Karloff's giving him, because Talbot's always like, "When are you going to help? I can't. It's a living hell to do that again." He's like, "Just easy, my boy. Just watch Frankie." And Neiman thaws them out, of course, and he tries to cure Talbot of his werewolfism, but he secretly wants to actually work on the monster even more. The film began production. Let's take a look at that. The Chamber of Horrors. With there's John Carradine before he emerges with the stake in his heart. But the story was supposed to involve several Universal properties. Universal initially planned it to be called Chamber of Horrors. Isn't that right, Court?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
And then the Devil's Brood, which was kind of a catch-all title for a lot of
Right.
their.
And then this project was halted with the idea later revived as House of Frankenstein. And let's see, I got a photo of Dr. Niemann. There he is before Boris shaved. And anyway, filming began April 4th, 1944, and concluded on May 8th. And it opened in New York on December 15th, 1944. We already talked about mostly what the plot was about. We can move on how he wants to exact his revenge on the Bürgermeister, Herr Huthmann, who put him in prison for trying to put the brain of a dog into the brain of a man, or the brain of a man inside the brain of a dog. And we know that doesn't work. And so a lot of, I guess, stuff ensues. Of course, as I said, his main goal is to revive the monster. And the monster's only in it for 5 minutes, Cord, or he's only in it at the very end kind of thing, right?
Yep.
And anyway, so Husman's granddaughter, played by the lovely Anne Gwynn, who plays Rita, gets involved, and of course Peter Coe is in this movie, and he plays the husband, who makes, I guess, kind of a bunch of silly jokes about the man being in charge, and then they go back and forth before they end up going to that Chamber of Horrors get-together. But anyway. So as I said, he wants to exact his revenge. Meanwhile, Dracula's alive and well, and he has John Carradine. He has set his sights on the beautiful Anne Gwynn. I guess he didn't tell Dr. Niemann that he plans on putting the bite on her. And there's some great scenes we're going to go over later about her putting on his ring. Anyway, they chase him in a stagecoach, and things don't look good. Daniel throws out his coffin. I don't know why he did that, but I guess it's just to help him out. But he gets to it too late, and he, I guess, evaporates, unfortunately. But Anne Gwynn and Peter Coe back together, and that little subplot is finished. But then I guess the werewolf attacked. They picked up, I forgot, Alanka. They picked up the beautiful Elena Verdugo, uh, who was dancing and prancing around, and Daniel has fallen in love with her. Unfortunately, Karloff didn't waste all his time just so he could prance around, with a gypsy girl. And there's the scene where Lon told her, "You better fill a couple, bullets in this gun and shoot me." Although what's funny is I'm going to mention later. Remember, silver bullets really couldn't kill a werewolf, so I guess that kind of changed there. Let's not forget the great Lionel Atwill is in this as the inspector. He's in also in House of Dracula as well. If I can find a photo of Lionel. And he always kind of plays the same guy, Court, the guy, that same look with the same hat, but this time he's not like Inspector Cloak from Son of Frankenstein. He actually has use of both his arms. And then, of course, the great Sig Rumen is in this as Herr Bürgermeister, who calls everything rubbish. He doesn't believe in the supernatural, and he gets to pay for it later in the end when Dracula puts the bite on him. So in the end, though, things don't look well as the townspeople see all the electricity. It's always the same thing, isn't it, Court? The townspeople see the lights going on in the castle. It's okay, we'll come to it later. But anyways, the movie concludes with before Daniel tries to threaten the doctor for not helping him get the gypsy girl. The monster wakes up for his 5 minutes, giving Glenn Strange something to do. Unfortunately, there's no time to fix him. And the Wolfman is shot, as I said earlier. And so, unfortunately, then Glenn picks up Dr. Niemann. "No, that's quicksand." And he walks directly into the moat, and they both sink. And you see Boris takes a nice last gasp. He holds his breath before they go in. So anyway, that's with that, Court. I thought I'd also show a couple quick little of my favorite, posters or lobby cards from that. You can start your commentary on what you thought about this film.
Well, the thing about House of Frankenstein is this: it really, the direct connection between Ghost of Frankenstein and Frankenstein meets the Wolfman is, of course, that the monster is blind. So continuity started to, I think, unravel a little bit with House of Frankenstein. And it seemed to me very much that Universal wanted to start basically with a brand new mythology, kind of wiping things away. And it is true, Karloff does find the monster and the Wolfman in the ice, supposedly frozen in the floodwaters when the dam explodes at the end of Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. However, all of the inclusion of Dracula and this kind of, if you will, segmented structure of House of Frankenstein absolutely sets it apart from the ending of Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. This is a whole brand new group. And let's not forget that the original plan, when they started to discuss this movie, they wanted to try and include Kyrus. And, that would have been, I think, pretty ridiculous to put the mummy in there as well. And, different, Universal was always trying to, if you will, concoct new ways to bring all these characters together. It was literally the birth of the Marvel Universe. And at one point, they're talking about another combination film with the Mad Ghoul and Paula the Ape Woman. So this was always in the executive mind. But they gave the movie to Paul Malvern, who was a very expert producer whose primary background, though, was Westerns. And he did a lot of the John Wayne films at Monogram. So he was an action producer. And Earl Kenton, who had directed The Ghost of Frankenstein and, of course, his great horror classic, Island of Lost Souls, he was also an action director. And he had done a very good little knockoff of the Spoilers called North to the Klondike. That a movie I really love with Lon Chaney and Broderick Crawford and Evie Ankers. And he was a very efficient, but really, if you will, visually, I think, almost elegant action film director. If you had an action scene, boy, he was right on it with the right type of energy and everything else. We'll talk about the coach chase. But then for if you will, emotional scenes. Like here is the wonderful moments between Elena Verdugo and Lon Chaney, and I love her line when she asks him why is he always so depressed, and I always have a big smile for you, and he doesn't answer her right away. And what does she say? Don't start barking at me, not
Oh,
knowing, of course, that he is a lycanthrope. And so I think, and the moments between her and J. Carroll Nash, particularly when she gets so angry at him when he reveals to her that Larry Talbot is a werewolf and that he is never going to be in love with her, and she just goes crazy. And you're saying this because you're jealous because I'm in love with him, and I hate you because you're ugly and a hunchback. And that leads us to this that great Freudian moment where Nash picks up the whip and starts beating the Frankenstein monster strapped to the table because he says, "This is all your fault. You know, if you didn't exist, Dr. Niemann would be giving me a new body. If you didn't exist, Alanka would be in love with me." And all of this stuff is going on. So there's all this emotional underpinnings to all this monster action. I always found that kind of fascinating. But it is also a segmented structure. It's like two episodes of a serial: the Dracula episode that ends with Carradine's death, and then we get back on the road with Professor Niemann and Daniel, and we go off and we find Alanka the Gypsy Girl, and then we find the Frankenstein monster and the Wolfman, and then it's that story. So all of these, I think, creative decisions were all coming because they had a brand new group of people from the top in charge of these movies. And it was the same group who did House of Dracula. Both movies, by the way, photographed by the brilliant George Robinson, who was a remarkable cameraman and so responsible for the look of the most elegant Universal horror films. He was amazing.
oh, absolutely. And I'm just looking at my notes here, and it'd be nice if I could find them. Okay, so basically, what you're saying is absolutely true in that. And there we go. Uh, the film itself isn't like a. It's talk about this a little bit later. It is almost like two stories in one, where one begins and then the other starts. And I think I mentioned this before because, or I'll mention it later, that the writer and Kurt Seidmach worked together on this. So maybe there was a convolution of ideas. So, I guess maybe the studio wanted to add Dracula to this film as opposed to just having Frankenstein. What do you think, Court?
But you remember that Siodmak just wrote the story. He was hired for a scenario, turned it in, and then he walked away. Edward T. Lowe, who worked on the screenplay to the Lon Chaney Senior Hunchback of Notre Dame, that's how long his history with Universal went back. He wrote the scripts for both of these movies.
Right. No, he absolutely did. And and so when we talk about this film, it does go hand in hand with the other ones, with Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, and a little bit of Ghost. So it's kind of like a serial almost, if you want to think, almost like the Phantom Creeps with Lugosi. It keeps going. There's one after another that in that same mindset.
But they got rid of the blindness for the monster.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And although they would say the end of Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, when Lugosi is at full power there, those last few moments, and he grins and, he suddenly seems aware that, okay, his blindness actually is cured in that moment, and then he and the Wolfman fight. But there is, other than the deterioration of the monster for having he's been dropped in sulfur, he's been burned up, he's been shot, he's been absolutely everything, parboiled, you name it. So yes, when Boris Karloff, the desiccation of the tissues and all that type of stuff, yeah, what? No crap, Boris, come on. this this monster's been through absolutely everything. So I think that was also another way, if you will, of starting kind of a new chronology for these characters. And they were probably willing for them to keep going beyond House of Dracula if Universal had not changed hands and all these types of movies were, just put on the chopping block,
Right.
just halted.
Because there is a, even though fans, Universal fans, love this movie. If you read on the blogs and in the different forums, a lot of them think this was the beginning of the end. Well, it actually was in reality. I mean, House of Dracula, House of Frankenstein, A and C, Meet Frankenstein, and that was it before the creature movies and the tarantula movies. But I don't look at it that way. I just look at it as one big oeuvre of work of the Universal world, where these, what, 30 plus films exist. And I think each one is related to the other, even though the Wolfman's not in the Mummy and the Mummy isn't in Frankenstein. But there's some ongoing theme of just of terror and the unknown and the mistreatment of science and trying to dare to be God. From Dr. Frankenstein to Dr. Niemann, it's this power trip. Remember, he pushes aside Lon. If you kill me, you'll never be cured.
Oh yeah, and and that this is a thing too that I've always found intriguing, is that these movies, of course, were made during the height of World War II, and they presented a Europe that did not exist, and the time frame is always a little, let's just say, flexible, since the beginning of the Wolfman, Lon Chaney arrives in that snazzy little convertible. And then in Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, everybody's riding around, in horse-drawn carts and everything. So it's like, wait a minute, what is the year here, and where does this in fact happen? And there's kind of, if you will, a not only does it exist in the Visceria monster kind of fairyland, but remember, there's that wonderful moment when they come to the gypsy camp where Alanka is dancing and all of that, and uh, the gendarmes show up, and he says, "What are you doing here? Where's your permit?" And he's like, "We have a chamber of horrors, and we're going." And he goes, "Hey, well, we won't allow you to stay here. You
Get out
got
of
to move
here."
on. You get out of here." And he's like, "But there's nothing here to offend anybody." And then this cop, I love it, goes, "Look, see that castle? Well, a couple of years ago, Frankenstein's monster and the Wolfman were in there, and they were fighting, and then we drowned them. So we've had enough of this stuff." It's just wonderful, because it's just part of their everyday lives. This
Right.
dealing with these monsters, and I just think that's just glorious, because it is truly the ultimate suspension of disbelief.
Oh, it's a throwaway shot with it's that long shot of them in the valley. All right, Daniel, I guess we'll have to go.
Yep, I guess we'll have to
Let's
move
pack
on.
up our troubles and leave. But no, I mean, it's just an all around great film. And what's interesting about these later films is their short running times. 60, 65 minutes, 77, no more 90 minutes, or, well, I guess because the studios wanted to fit these in maybe as double bills and play as a matinee and stuff. But, because you would think, why isn't this movie 80, 85 minutes? But it's a fun 60, 65 though, Court.
But that's the thing too. Universal's kind of production philosophy. There were exceptions, certainly, but generally they were doing the 60 to 70-minute programmer films, even whether it was with Abbott and Costello, or a Sherlock Holmes, or one of the teenager musicals, or whatever it might be, that existed for double bills. That was always the way. They wanted two movies in there, which, and also probably a Walter Lantz cartoon and a Universal newsreel, maybe a serial. And that was the way they built their bills. And it was also how these things were rented out. And also, too, we have to remember the way that Universal was operating in these times. They didn't own theaters. So it was absolutely individual exchanges from state to state. And what was the most appealing? One stop shopping where you got all of this material for one rental price? Absolutely. That was great. Then these guys didn't have to worry about, okay, I'll get something from Universal and something from Columbia or whatever, and try and pair it and what have you. And also, too, just for history's accuracy, whenever people say, well, it was the beginning of the end for the Universal horror because it was the monster jamboree, and all these comments that people make about House of Frankenstein, the thing is, House of Frankenstein was a hit. And it did particularly well at the Hawaiian Theater, which was, yes, it was a horror showcase and all that, all the rest of that stuff. But the movie did really well. And that it seems to be kind of the missing link in the argument. Maybe they're talking about the quality, or, oh my gosh, House of Frankenstein isn't as good as Bride of Frankenstein or The Black Cat or whatever else you want to say. All of which is true. But to try and designate the movies a failure, certainly from a box office standpoint, is wrong.
Right. No, absolutely. All good points. So, Court, now that we've dissected and gone over what our thoughts were on the film, I think now it's, I guess, a fun time. We're usually in a regular show, you just review it and you move on. But I think it's fun to go, as I said earlier in the show, to look back at some of the more memorable scenes. And I mean, almost a snapshot. Obviously, we can't, through copyright reasons, show any parts of any Universal film, but you can show snapshots or screenshots and then comment over them. So I'm going to do that, and kind of a little fun part of the show that I like to call scenes and dialogue, and let's do that right now. Okay, scenes and dialogue. As I said earlier, because some Universal horror classics have more memorable scenes and great dialogue than others, sometimes we'll feature them because there's not that many. A lot of the, Frankenstein, or the Bride of Frankenstein, they all have great say, "She hate me like others," or "Ooh, I thought I was alone." She hate. "I love dead, hate living. You're wise in your generation." So there's so many great classic lines in Universal horror that I thought it would be fun just to take a look from this film. Some fun things. So let's take a look. Let's see if I can find some scenes. Let's start off with the first one. It's the first scene in House of Frankenstein, the opening prison storm court. "Now will you give me my chalk?" I mean, you already know with that opening line, it's like, all right, we're going to have fun with this movie. It's just, the dialogue just starts from here and keeps revving up. And
Charles Wagenheim.
Charles Wagenheim, the great Charles Wagenheim, and his best role probably. And then the wagon ride to Regalburg, where Karloff wants revenge, and he asks him, "Are you going to Regalburg?" "No, it's they had their own chamber of horrors. They're realistic. Needless to say, we're going to Regalburg." and Lampini says, "We are not going to Regalburg. Then Daniel and I are going alone." And then, of course, he meets his comeuppance, and he gives a great speech about Lampini before his death, about the Chamber of Horror. "It's a doubting world, kind sir." So, anyway, and then the next scene after that is when Niemann and Daniel, after they've disposed of Lampini, Daniel's a little worried.
Hiding out in the open.
Right. Should we hide, master? So we shall, in the open, with all the protection of a traveling show. I with Lampini, and you with my assistant. I mean, it just, he doesn't care. Niemann is kind of, he's a nice guy. He's evil and he's dastardly, but he's got some great one-liners in the movie. So the next scene after this, of course, is at the Chamber of Horrors, where Karloff, opens up and introduces. He gives this big spiel about, "I give you now the last remains of Dracula, the vampire," and so nobody else can enjoy it. Now you know why the Burgermeister, should be killed. "Rubbish, gibberish, bats, vampires, every word of it." And it's like, "You seem to doubt what I say, Herr Burgermeister." And then it's funny is Herr Burgermeister looks at him and goes, Say, you look familiar. Do I know you? My name is Lampini." "You're not the Lampini I ran out of this area 3 years ago. That with a quick thinking Boris, that with my brother, recently deceased." "You remind me of someone I can't recall." "Perhaps you will remember later, Herr Burgermeister." That is my favorite scene in the movie, Court.
Well, of course, Sig Ruman was so wonderful and gave Edward G. Robinson just a horrible time in Dr. Ehrlich's Magic Bullet. But if you want ultimate, and here he's, he's an authority figure, and he's Karloff's enemy because he helped throw him into jail and all of that stuff. But if anybody wants the real Sigruman villainy, he is the landlord in White Christmas, who is
Oh.
tossing out Vera Ellen and Rosemary Clooney for destroying his rug. So, boo.
Oh, right. No,
Yes.
Sig is great. He's one of,
Sig gets what he deserves for
I also
victimizing
remember him one
those
of the
beautiful girls.
Russian agents in Ninochka too, which is he's great at.
Absolutely. You bet.
So moving on to the next scene in dialogue, it's the great scene in this same. It happens right afterwards. Niemann's so pissed, that his cover might be blown, that he just, I guess, unthinkingly removes the stake from John Carradine's heart, and then and almost like in a Wolfman type of time lapse, the bones turn into Carradine, and he even licks his lips like, "Ooh, fresh air." And he notices Boris holding this, and he says, "Drop the stake from your hand. Drop it." And Boris, he's strong. Dr. Niemann's got a strong will of his own. "Yes, but if you move, I'll send your soul back to the limbo of eternal waiting. But do as I ask, and I'll serve you. I will protect the earth upon which you lie." And Dracula says, "For that I will do whatever you wish." And I just thought, there's Dracula being subservient. When does the Prince of Darkness do that, Court?
And well, and also too, again, here is, look what they did. They gave Dracula another alternate identity as Baron Latos. So that, I think, that goes to this idea of, let's kind of burn down everything that's come before and start all over again.
Right, and I think his characterization, if you read some of the books, is more closer to what Stoker had in mind, the more distinguished, non-accented, kind of distinguished gentleman with a top hat, which is kind of cool. I love both Lugosi's and Carradine. You know the old thing, which is better? Everybody, Lugosi, but Baron Latos is an entity upon himself, and there's no...
Absolutely is. And I think I was wonderful because I love Carradine as Baron Latos. I, of course, absolutely adore Bela Lugosi. The hypnotic, and then the raw savagery of Lon Chaney and Son of Dracula. They're all terrific. So
absolutely,
yeah, I can't make a choice.
No, it's tough to do. So anyway, moving on. Where am I? Here I am. Anne Gwyn back at the house, who's her husband's is it daughter or niece? I forget.
Granddaughter.
Granddaughter. Anyway, she's having a nice little wine with Baron Latos, while I guess Peter Coe's down in the wine cellar trying to get another bottle, and
not for the first time.
Right, and her husband's falling asleep. What was I saying? I haven't the faintest idea what I was saying. So he moves his ring, and her eyes follow it. And, "You're admiring my ring." She's like in one of the great lines of someone who's like not knowing what's going to happen to her. "When I look at it, I see glimpses of a strange world, a world where people are dead and yet alive." And Carradine says, "It's a place from which I just returned." It's a great place. They got picnic baskets and park benches, and then later he tries to put the ring on her. She goes, "It's too large." And his great response is, "It'll become smaller."
I know. Thanks to John P. Fulton, it does.
Right. And it's just a great scene. And you'll see in House of Frankenstein later, he does the same thing with Martha O'Driscoll, puts her in a trance. He wants to make her a part of his an undead bride. It's just these girls. What it is there's a formula. As you said, the writer, what's his name again, Court?
Edward T. Lowe.
Right. You can tell that he knows what he's doing when Dracula puts the spell on these women and they're at his disposal. And I think it's kind of the same thing. You just substitute Martha with Anne, and it works that way. So anyway, and then we're going to get to a part of the movie which you and I always talk about, Court, and that's the horse wagon chase, where Baron Latos has put Anne Gwyn, who's in a trance, into his horse-drawn wagon. I don't know where he's going to take her, maybe to a quiet, evening place where he can put the bite on her. But what he didn't knock out Peter Coe. He just took off, and it's like there wasn't a plan to it. But in these movies, it's just the plan is just get away, and it's a great scene. Kind of like, isn't John Carradine in Stagecoach Court?
He, no, he sure is, and this is a perfect image to show because what Kenton and Malvern, again, because of their incredible background with Western movies and this type of action, going back to the silent days, this is a beautifully structured thing. Now, it does maybe seem a little out of sync with a horror movie to have this fantastic Western coach chase in this film because you have Carradine, then you have Karloff and J. Carroll Nash in their double wagon. Then you have the police and Peter Coe following on those huge, gorgeous white stallions. Is beautiful intercutting. And one of the wonderful things you see, and it's just basic movie vocabulary from this era, is everything is moving from left to right throughout the sequence until you see J. Carroll Nash on top of the wagons and he is moving from right to left, jumping to the back. And it's a really nice process shot. I think it's beautifully done. And what they want to do is get rid of Dracula's casket because they know he can't go anywhere without it, just to get the police off their back because Neiman and Daniel don't want to be caught. So that great shot of the casket being pushed out of the back of the circus wagon, and then the pin that holds the horse team to Carradine's wagon, it comes loose. They run off around the circus wagon while the stagecoach goes off the road, flips over. Carradine is thrown, and he then scrambles to get to his casket before the sun comes up. And that gorgeous, and I'm sure we've got a shot of it, indoor outdoor set, which I think is just wonderful. So it is a beautifully structured action moment, but kind of almost from another genre, but they dropped it in here because that was the background of these filmmakers. And I love that sequence.
No, I know. We've discussed it. It is one of your favorites. And then after this scene, we've discussed this too, is the whipping scene, I guess that where Ilanka, the gypsy, made some money and she's holding the cash, and the guy who she's hooked up with, the head of the gypsies, wants her money, and she doesn't want to give it to him, so she instinctively slaps him when she grabs the money.
You smelly pig.
Yeah, big mistake. And so then what's weird is he kind of what we planned, like this planned movement of moving her. Remember, he grabs her by the wrist and kind of just side tosses her in this kind of side step to get her into like camera view.
Brings up the whip, and then another actress steps in front of the camera to block the actual whipping.
Right. See, right there.
And it's a beautifully composed shot and very clever way to get around any censorship problems.
Right. I remember that scene. It's almost like it's very Greg Tolan-like, that kind of scene, because she steps right in front of it for about a second or two, and then it cuts to a woman coming out of the wagon to stop the guy from whipping her. So it's a very very trippy scene, very, I don't know, if noirish, or just, it's very Tolan-like with the shoulder there. Even though it's a throwaway scene, it still packs a bunch of meanings into that scene. Okay, so then we move on. It's when Karloff, Neiman, and Daniel find the underground, ice cavern. They find the Wolfman and the Frankenstein monster, and Neiman looks at what you're seeing and just basically says, "The Wolfman," and that's basically it. And then Master over here, and that's where they find Frankenstein. I'm going to talk about this later in tidbits. What's very ironic and funny about this kind of icy chamber. Anyway, you want to say something about that, Cord, or?
Oh, I think it's a beautiful, beautiful sequence, and the set is just wonderful, but so completely enhanced with a gorgeous mat work of the icicles hanging down from the ceiling and coming in from the walls. It's just gorgeously composed, and again, the production value consistently on House of Frankenstein. Maybe they think everything is a little too intimate or what have you, but then boom, the screen just widens and explodes with a set piece just like this, or some incredible production design, like the beautiful escape from the thunderstorm when the half the prison wall
Right.
collapses, and they so it's just, if you will, uh, as I used to say, it's puffed with little spectacles
It
throughout,
is.
and that's why I think it still it just it works, and it is not not quite the poor cousin everybody would like it to
No,
be.
not at all. See, when you and I analyze it, you can see that it's a little bit more grandeur than just a B picture. So anyway, just a few seconds later, a few minutes later, in the same sequence, in the same scene, the Wolfman is thawed out. I guess he's next to a little fire, and his hands are in front of him. And then, the next thing you know, he's back to Lon again. He doesn't attack. He just unfreezes and becomes Larry Talbot. What's funny is after Neiman. Uh, he approaches him. Who are you? What do you want? He goes, I'm a doctor. I can help you. And Lon's basically repeating the same thing he's been saying since Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, and he will continue to say in House of Dracula, I just want to die. Only death can bring me release, which is his famous words. And what's so funny about, and I'll talk about this a little later, is that Karloff, even though he's killed people and he wants revenge, he takes on kind of a sweet dad persona. You don't have to die, my boy. I can help you. You know, and he's just like, how? How can you help me? Another great scene that continues from the previous one, Court.
Well, of course, Karloff has all of these secret plans and what have you, but I tell you something. God bless Lon Chaney for this movie for one thing. He is given one of the most ridiculously stilted lines of dialogue in the history of American cinema
Mm-hmm.
to say in this scene, and he pulls it off. Why have you freed me from the ice that has trapped the beast within me? Try
Right.
saying that 10 times. Oh my God. So, and he did it. So, he earned his paycheck this day, that's for sure.
Oh no, definitely, definitely. And then, um, and then moving on, he explains to him, "Well, I can help you if you just find me the records." Unfortunately, Lon's been through this before. He got Lugosi as the monster to find the records, you know, grunting and groaning. In Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. Now he's going to get Dr. Niemann to help him find the records. Lon is just in this continual search for Dr. Frankenstein's records. And what's funny is he explains later, yeah, I found him, so what? He died and I wasn't cured. So you can see he's a doubting Thomas because, he just wants to die until he's dead. He's just not going to believe anybody can help him. But anyway, moving on to the next scene where they're traveling with a frozen monster in the wagon. And Daniel just keeps harboring on, Master, you promised me you'd give me a new body. Just leave me alone, friend Daniel. Just it's not happening for you. You're going to be a hunchback the rest of your life now. Just go sit down and warm a towel for the monster. But what's funny is he's not happy about, in this particular scene, of him telling Talbot to go, can you drive a wagon? I think so. So he tells Lon to go drive the wagon. But the reason why Daniel liked to do it, because he got to sit up front with Ilanka, of course, so he's not too thrilled. So he's, Master, why can't I drive at least part of the time? and of course, Karloff says, well, Talbot bothers me with his everlasting impatience. And it's so great. You feel for Daniel. Karloff's right. Cheney won't leave him alone. And Frankie just wants to get warm.
Yeah, that's it. And, again, Dr. Niemann has his own schedule and the own way he's going to make things work. And suddenly, with Larry Talbot, he has kind of a new resource of body parts and everything else. And so this really leaves friend Daniel out in the cold, especially when it comes to his hots for Alanka.
Well, of course, what you can see is Nemon's a user. You know, he uses him to break
Oh,
out of
yes.
prison, uses him to kidnap Ullman and Strauss, which we'll get to, which is the next scene, which is my second favorite scene in the movie because of the dialogue is so quick-witted. And that's when he's kidnapped, the two guys who betrayed him, especially his assistant, who I guess ratted him out to the courts, and he had to spend 15 years in prison. So he's got them both tied up. They have no idea what's going on. And pardon me, Husman, you know Heth Strauss? It's just so funny and kind of a dark comedy. You two don't know each other, do you? And then Strauss said, "Don't kill me. Kill my trusted old assistant? Why, no. I'm going to repay you for betraying me. I'm going to give you your brain a new home inside the skull of the Frankenstein monster. And as for you, Strauss, I'm going to give you the brain of the Wolfman so that all your waking hours will be spent in untold agony." I love this scene, and I sometimes just watch it over and over again because he's so nonchalant and so just, this is what I'm going to give you to. You two should be honored that I'm going to be, taking out your brains and putting it into the two monsters.
Well, and also this shows Universal's own sense of at least casting continuity, because there's Michael Mark on the left, who of course is the father of Maria, who was drowned in the very first film. And Mark would make periodic appearances in practically every single Frankenstein sequel. And on the other side, there on the right, is Frank Riker, of course, Captain Englehorn from King Kong. But he had become very much part of the Universal Horror, if you will, troupe and casting company, because of he's in this. He had a kind of semi-regular role in The Mummy's Ghost and even The Mummy's Tomb, and and of course Night Monster.
And the
He
Black
has a
Cat.
the Black Cat. He has a very significant role. So it's fun to see if our old friends pop up in different parts, and that's one of the charms of these movies. Is you're like, oh my gosh, look, there's Dwight Fry again, or there's this one, or there's that one, or Skelton Nags, who we'll see in House of Dracula. And I think that I don't want to say gives us a warm and fuzzy feeling, but it certainly plays to our horror comfort zone that this great troupe of actors repeats themselves over and over again.
Right, which is something we should mention, that there was that same troupe of actors in all these films. And I think, was it Michael Hoey, Dennis Hoey's son, wrote a book called The Faces, I think, of Universal, which is a great book. And because he grew up on the set, and so it wasn't only, they weren't only in the Sherlock Holmes movies, it was just a repertoire of I'd say about maybe 35, 40 actors and actresses who were in every single Universal horror film.
Sure.
And most of them were British, too.
Oh, yeah, and whether it was someone like Mary Gordon, or it was C. Henry Gordon,
Or E. E. Clive.
E. Clive, or right. I mean, just on and on. These were the people that they wanted featured in front of the camera. Look,
Right.
even at, say, John Carradine. John Carradine goes back to Invisible Man before he was in Bride of Frankenstein and The Black Cat, and these. So there is just this whole, if you will, kind of history that we know and that we have, but it's kind of transforms, I think, these movies. It's just a sense of that community when you watch these films.
Right, and it's so just cool to see what they're going to be this time. Will they be a villager? Will they be a doctor? Will they be a bartender? So, it's just really cool to see what they'll be. This last scene here I put in for you, Court, because I know it's one of your favorite scenes, where Daniel wants Talbot's body, and Karloff's like, I don't think so, Daniel. Master, you made me a promise. No, you think I'd wreck the work of a lifetime because you're in love with a gypsy girl?
Gypsy girl, you bet. You bet.
So I threw that in.
Dr. Neiman, he is non-romantic and a racist.
Because he emphasizes the gypsy girl aspect of it.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
But anyway, so as far as those, that's what we call scenes and dialogue. So hopefully we'll have that as a segment on different films we review. It's a fun way to look at the screenshot and talk about what went into it and just the dialogue that remains in our memories. So anyway, and I think now we're gonna. I said I have a thing called tidbits. So hopefully you've grabbed some popcorn and your favorite beverage because we ain't going anywhere yet, Court. Tidbits is little things you might have not known about the film, and you and I can go back and talk about it a little bit here and there. Universal went with John Carradine in this instead of Lugosi. Of course, the rumors and books have written because perhaps Bella's poor portrayal of the monster, and I don't buy that. Actually, because what I read, which makes more sense, he was touring in Arsenic and Old Lace. So he couldn't break the contract of doing that stage show. But just think about that, Court. If Lugosi wasn't busy, maybe he would have stepped in and been I'm Baron Latos, or would he have still played Count Dracula? I wonder how they would have written that.
Well, Lugosi's relationship with Universal was so complicated and fraught with issues. And of course, this was also the period where they were kind of putting into films in kind of secondary parts. Honestly, why he is only the butler in Night Monster is always, I think he's just fine, but it really is a subservient role to so many other parts in the movie, including Nils Astor as the Mystic. I mean, that should have been Bela Lugosi. So whatever the attitude was by the front office, and of course Lugosi going on the tour for Arsenic and Old Lace, there's the other aspect, which is House of Frankenstein and the climax were Boris Karloff's return to studio horror films after his astoundingly successful Broadway run on Arsenic and Old Lace. And that play made him very wealthy. And he comes back to Universal, and it sure as hell wasn't for the money he got for The Raven, I can tell you that much. And, his attitude about these two movies was always a little, not dismissive, but lackadaisical. There's a interview with him on a Canadian radio station. It was done in the early 60s. And they asked him about House of Frankenstein. He honestly could not remember that Glenn Strange had played the monster. He thought it was Lon Chaney.
Well, right, because Lon, I guess he filled in on a couple scenes, didn't he? Or
well, not on this one, but certainly.
Which one did Lon play the monster? Was it Frankenstein meets Wolfman?
No, that was Ghost of Frankenstein.
No, I know that, but remember there's a part where Lon actually. Is it where he tosses the girl in AC meets?
That's it. That's Abbott and Costello meets.
Right, that's what I thought. Okay.
Stepped in for Glenn. I always felt, and Karloff wasn't trying to be mean or whatever. And he and Glenn Strange were friends, but I think that it just shows his kind of overall feeling about doing this film, which I think he regarded as a programmer.
Right.
And because it was right after these two back-to-backs for Universal that he went to Val Lewton.
Oh, okay. So let's just go through some trivia. We'll just quickly go through some of these things. House of Frankenstein was, I guess, Boris's first film back at Universal since Black Friday, 1940. So it'd been a while since he'd been back. And what's interesting, his character, remember he says, Did you know Dr. Frank? No, but my brother did. You know who his brother is? Fritz. Fritz Niemann. Oh. Dwight Fry from Frankenstein is Dr. Niemann's brother. Did you know that, Cord, or did I stump you on that one?
Wow, I did not. Are you sure that's a...
Oh, I did my research. I looked in 3 different books, and I was like, who is this brother? That was my brother. I got the secrets from him. Like, who's his brother supposed to be?
Wow.
Fritz Niemann. So that's a trip in itself. So anyway, we also mentioned the original working title was The Devil's Brood. And outside of his brief 5-second shot in Return of the Ape-Man Court, George Zucco's Professor Lampini is sadly, I think, his smallest role in a horror film. Would you agree with
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
but they kind of were just building these cameos into this because they wanted to be kind of this horror potpourri.
right.
Just let's get everybody in there.
You're actually right. Extended cameos, if you think about it. I would have preferred if he just would have threatened Lampini, "Do as I say, and I'll let you live." And so he basically be one of his henchmen. "All right, kind sir, what do you want me to do next?" It would have been great to keep Lampini alive for a little while. But anyway, another interesting bit of trivia: Court Visaria, in the previous film Visaria, which is where I think you moved to.
Yes.
It was spelled with a VI in previous films, but in House of Frankenstein, for some odd reason, it's VA Visaria. I don't know why that was done. I guess it's not really explained. Which do you prefer, VA or VI, Court?
I kind of go VA. It just rolls off the tongue a little better.
Okay. Another interesting tidbit is Dr. Niemann is heading toward Visaria, toward Dr. Ludwig Frankenstein's Henry's second son's ruined castle, which just so happens to be located at the same town as the people who condemned Niemann's experiments. What a coincidence. Just same place. Let's go to the same place where I was sent to prison, Daniel.
And the thing is, of course, the second son of Frankenstein, where he's going is the ruins of a mental institution.
That's right. Yeah. Right. Then Dr. Niemann and Daniel find Frankenstein's lab uh, buried as they find the monster and Wolfman encased. This is something that's very trippy. Encased in a glacier ice, because Karloff says, "Oh, they've been encased in glacier ice," even though there aren't really glaciers that form in isolated caves in that part of the world. So glacier caves is these are just tidbits, Court, I'm throwing out there.
Well, that's one of the problems of owning real estate in Visaria.
You never know what you're going to get underground.
Exactly. You got buyer beware.
And J. Carroll Nash is awesome as usual as the outcast Daniel, kind of like his 8-man character in Dr. Renault's Secret. What do you think, Court?
Well, that's the thing. Dr. Renault's Secret, which was for 20th Century Fox, it's a very odd movie because it kind of is it a horror movie? Is it a thriller with horror elements to it? And it has kind of a strange structure to it. But Nash is, in fact, to me, very much projecting, if you will, the animal like qualities that Lon Chaney did when he played his 8-man character in Blind Bargain.
Oh, okay.
And I think that I don't want to say that he wasn't copying anything, but I'm sure that there was, if you will, a bit of a template because he's also, I'm sure, thinking about when they talk about the Hunchback, of course, most people are thinking about Quasimodo.
Right.
So, but there was always going to be sympathy there, but in Dr. Renault's Secret, he is actually part simian.
Oh, that's true. Absolutely. And we'll
Yep.
talk about that when we review both George Zucco's and J. Carroll Nash's films.
Yep.
Anyway, so Lionel Atwill, like Zucco, has an extremely small role as the inspector. Once again, a glorified cameo. Anne Gwynn was Queen of the Bees, and she's actually plays very well that she's mesmerized by Dracula very convincingly. Elena Verdugo as the gypsy girl Ilanka. She was only 19 when she played that role, Court. I didn't know that at all. I was like, wow, I thought she was in her mid-20s. Very great role for her. She acted that perfectly. And everybody knows later on, I think near the end of her career, she played the assistant in Marcus Welby. And I think she won an Emmy.
She did. And no, she was a wonderful actress. And I will always say that the role to see her in is as the beautiful young native girl who falls in love with George Sanders' Paul Gauguin in The Moon and Sixpence. It is a remarkable performance that she gives, and it's very naturalistic. It's also very sensuous, and I mean, it's like, whoa, how did this get past the censors? And she's younger there than she was in House of Frankenstein, and she's fun and bubbly, and she's the nice little plump girl that everybody
She knows how to
in
turn a
love with.
hunchback down very gently,
She
I guess.
does,
Yeah.
and of course she does. I mean, it's a better written part than say something like the Frozen Ghost, where of course she's the younger sister who's in love, or the niece who's in love with
Right.
Lon Chaney and trying to fend off Martin Koslick. So she definitely had her Universal horror pedigree, but as you know, later in her life, she was thrilled that people had this high regard for her from House of Frankenstein. She got a great kick out of it.
And she just recently passed a couple years ago.
Yep,
So she was with
very
us
nice
up
lady.
until, I think, 2017. Sig Ruman, we mentioned, is the great suspicious Burgermeister Hussman. Niemann. When he gets the bite on from Carradine. Directed by the great Earl C. Ketton, who also directed Island of Lost Souls and Ghost of Frankenstein and, of course, House of Frankenstein. And he's known for his shadowy, misty, creepy atmospheres, isn't he, Court?
Well, he is. And again, he was a journeyman director who directed right off the page. When he was at Paramount, he was doing action movies and he was doing all kinds of different things. And don't forget, Earl Kent, in the middle of his horror assignments at Universal, directed "Pardon My Sarong" with Abbott and Costello, which is practically psychedelic. That thing is so crazy. And I've always suspected, and which Lionel Atwill is in that, by the way. I've always suspected that the outlandishness of that movie was inspired by the Broadway success of Hell's a Poppin' with Olsen and Johnson, because it was kind of like anything goes. There's no logic to anything, just go wild. And I think that's what they were trying. That's what they tried with Abbott and Costello, and Earl C. Kenton was the director. He was also one of the last directors to be pink slipped out of Universal when they were shutting everything down, the B units and what have you, when they were bought by International Pictures. And he directed one of the very last mysteries under the old guard, which was The Cat Creeps with Noah Beery and Lois Collier.
Right, the great Lois Collier. And also,
Yep.
we'd be remiss if we didn't mention George Robinson, who photographed this film essentially with the same crew as he did with Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman,
He was a genius,
along with
absolute
Jack
genius.
Pierce did the makeup. So it's basically he had the same crew, it was the same set designers, same just everyone who worked on Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, I guess, just came along, which is nice when you use the same crew. It's just back in the day. We're both filmmakers. I always thought I'd be a great fantasy to make a film, and I know they made of God and monsters about whale and stuff like that. And there's a brief scene with Jack Betts as Karloff, but I'd love to see a movie about those days being on the set of Universal in the 30s and 40s. You have Karloff, Lugosi. I know we're off topic for a second, but I was just thinking, you just see people playing Rathbone and Laurie and what it was like making an old Universal film in the 30s and 40s. Just that would be incredible to do.
Well, by the time of World War II, and Universal realized that now some films were extremely beautifully presented, like The Wolfman, for example, made by yet another director who did not have a horror background, George Wagner. He was another Western guy. This is something that I think is really consistent, certainly with the films in the 40s, is that these were journeyman directors, journeyman writers, and journeyman casts. They went from movie to movie to movie, and it was like, okay, let's shift gears. You've just been out for 3 weeks making, the Daltons ride again, and now you're going to be making Weird Woman, or you've it, and everybody had a way to change their attitude about the work. The directors had a way of shifting their visual attitude about how to present the subject. And I think it was great because the skill set had to be so enormous in order to do these movies well. Because if you were doing movie A for 3 weeks, guess what? 5 weeks, you could be doing
You need to
movie
go.
B and it'd be completely
Go.
different.
So anyway, thanks again for watching, and bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.